Hello, everyone. I know that this story has been trending, and I may be a little late on it, but this is on Jerry Lee Lewis. He died at the age of 87. Now, you know he was called, like, he was referred to as an outrageous rock and roll star. He married, and he's known for marrying his 13 years old cousin. Now, he was the untamable rock and roll pioneer whose outrageous talent, energy, and ego collided on such definitive records as Great Balls of Fire and A Whole Lot of Shaking Going On. You remember that? And he sustained a career otherwise upended by personal scandal. He died Friday morning at the age of 87. Now, he was the last survivor of a generation of groundbreaking performers, and in that groundbreaking performance was Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and Little Richard. So Lewis died at his Mississippi home. So he lived down in Mississippi, south of Memphis, Tennessee. A representative, Zach Farnham, said in the release. The news came 2 days after the publication of an erroneous TMZ report of his death, later retracted. Now, of all the rock labels to emerge in the 1950s, few captured the new genre's attraction and danger as unforgettably as the Louisiana-born piano player who called himself the Killer. Now, their tender ballads were best left to the old folks, but Lewis was all about lust and gratification, with his leering tenor and demanding asides, violent tempos, and brash glissandi, cocky sneer, and crazy blonde hair. He was a one-man stampede who made the fans scream and the keyboard swear. His live act so combustible that during a 1957 performance of Whole Lot of Shaking Going On the Steve Allen Show, chairs were thrown at him like buckets of water on an inferno. There was rockabilly, there was Elvis, but there was no pure rock and roll before Jerry Lewis kicked in the door, a Lewis admirer once observed. That admirer was Jerry Lee Lewis. But in his private life, he raged in ways that might have ended his career today, and nearly did back then. For a brief time, in 1958, he was a contender to replace Presley as rock's prime hit maker after Elvis was drafted into the Army. But while Lewis toured in England, the press learned three damaging things. He was married to 13-year-old, possibly even 12-year-old Myra Gayle Brown. She was his cousin, and he was still married to his previous wife. His tour was canceled. He was blacklisted from the radio, and his earnings dropped overnight to virtually nothing. He says, I probably would have rearranged my life a little bit different, but I never did hide anything from people. Lewis told the Wall Street Journal in 2014 when asked about the marriage, I just went on with my life as usual. Now, over the following decades, Lewis struggled with drug and alcohol abuse, legal disputes, and physical illness. 2 of his many marriages ended in his wife's early death. Brown herself divorced him in the early 1970s and would later allege physical and mental cruelty that nearly drove her to suicide. If I was still married to Jerry, I'd probably be dead by now, she told People magazine in 1989. Lewis reinvented himself as a country performer in the 1960s, and the music industry eventually forgave him long after he stopped having hits. He won 3 Grammys and recorded with some of the industry's greatest stars. In 2006, Lewis came out with Last Man Standing, featuring Mick Jagger, Bruce Springsteen, B.B. King, and George Jones. In 2010, Lewis brought in Jagger, Keith Richards, Sheryl Crow, Tim McGraw, and others for the album Mean Old Man. Now, you might know some of these singers like Sheryl Crow and Tim McGraw, and so anyway, in the Rolling Stone Illustrated History of Rock and Roll, first published in 1975, he recalled how he convinced disc jockeys to give him a second chance. This time I said, look, man, let's get together and draw a line on this stuff. A peace treaty, he explained. Lewis would still play the old hits on stage, but on the radio he would sing country. Lewis had a run of top 10 country hits between 1967 to 1970 and hardly mellowed at all. He performed drinking songs such as What's Made Milwaukee Famous Has Made a Loser Out of Me, the roving eye confessions of She Still Comes Around, and dry-eyed cover of a classic ballad of abandonment, She Even Woke Me Up to Say Goodbye. He had remained popular in Europe, and a 1964 album, Live at the Star Club Hamburg, is widely regarded as one of the greatest concert records. In 1973, performance proved more troublesome. Lewis sang for the Grand Ole Opry and broke two long-standing rules: no swearing and no non-country songs. He goes on to say, I am a rock and rolling, country and western, rhythm and blues singing mother effing, he told the audience. Lewis married 7 times and was rarely far from trouble or death. His 4th wife, Jaren Elizabeth Gunn Date, drowned in a swimming pool in 1982 while suing for divorce. His 5th wife, Sean Stevens, 23 years his junior, died of an apparent drug overdose in 1983. Within a year, Lewis had married Carrie McCarver, then 21. She filed for divorce in 1986, accusing him of physical abuse and infidelity. He countersued, but both petitions eventually were dropped. They finally divorced in 2005 after several years of separation. The couple had 1 child, Jerry Lee III. Another son by a previous marriage, Steve Allen Lewis III, drowned in a swimming pool in 1962. And son Jerry Lee Jr. died in a traffic accident at 19 in 1973. Lewis also had 2 daughters, Phoebe and Lori Lee, and is survived by his wife, Judith. His finances were all chaotic. Lewis made millions, but he liked his money in cash and ended up owing hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Internal Revenue Service. When he began welcoming tourists in 1994 to his longtime residence near Nesbit, Mississippi, complete with a piano-shaped swimming pool, he set up a 900 phone number fans could call for a recorded message at $2.75 a minute. The son of one-time bootlegger Elmo Lewis and the cousin of TV evangelist Jimmy Swaggart and country star Mickey Gilley, Lewis was born in Faraday, Louisiana. As a boy, he first learned to play guitar, but found the instrument too confining and longed for an instrument that only the rich people in his town could afford: a piano. His life changed when his father pulled up in his truck one day and presented him a dark wood upright piano. My eyes almost fell out of my head, Lewis recalled in Jerry Lee Lewis, his own story, written by Rick Bragg and published in 2014. He took to the piano immediately and began sneaking off to black juke joints and absorbing everything from gospel to boogie woogie. Boogie woogie. You remember the boogie woogie? Conflicted early on between secular and sacred music, he quit school at 16 with plans of becoming a piano-playing preacher. Lewis briefly attended Southwestern Assemblies of God University in Waxahachie, Texas, a fundamentalist Bible college, but was expelled, reportedly for playing the wrong kind of music. Great Balls of Fire, a sexualized take on biblical imagery that Lewis initially refused to record, and Whole Lotta Shakin' were his most enduring songs and performance pieces. Lewis had only a handful of other pop hits, including High School Confidential and Breathless, but they were enough to ensure his place as a rock and roll architect. No group, be it the Beatles, Dylan, or Stones, have ever improved on Whole Lotta Shakin' for my money, John Lennon would tell Rolling Stone in 1970. A Roadhouse veteran by his early 20s, Lewis took off for Memphis in 1956 and showed up at the studios of Sun Records, the musical home of Elvis, Carl Perkins, and Johnny Cash. Told by company founder Sam Phillips to go learn some rock and roll, Lewis returned and soon hurried off Whole Lotta Shakin' in a single take. I knew it was a hit when I cut it, he later said. Sam Phillips thought it was going to be too risky. He couldn't make it. If that's risky, well, I'm sorry. In 1986, along with Elvis, Chuck Berry, and others, he made the inaugural class of inductees for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and joined the Country Hall of Fame this year. The killer not only outlasted his contemporaries, but saw his life and music periodically reintroduced to younger fans, including the 1989 biopic Great Balls of Fire. starring Dennis Quaid and Ethan Coen's 2022 documentary Trouble in Mind. A 2010 Broadway music, Million Dollar Quartet, was inspired by a recording session that featured Lewis, Elvis, Perkins, and Cash. He won a Grammy in 1987 as part of an interview album that was cited for Best Spoken Word Recording, and he received a Lifetime Achievement Grammy in 2005. The following year, Whole Lotta Shakin' was selected for the Library of Congress National Recording Registry, whose board praised the propulsive boogie piano that was perfectly complemented by the drive of J.M. Van Eaton's energetic drumming. The listeners to the recording, like Lewis himself, had a hard time remaining seated during the performance. A classmate at Bible school, Perry Green, remembered meeting Lewis years later and asking if he was still playing the devil's music. "Yes, I am," Lewis answered, "but you know it's strange. The same music that they kicked me out of school for is the same kind of music they play in their churches today. The difference is I know I am playing for the devil and they don't." Now, there's a lot of stuff in this story that I can pinpoint out, and I would like you all to leave your respectful comments below on this story. And what do you associate some of these things to the R. Kelly trial, because the case of what they did to R. Kelly? Because when you really when you really read this story, with this man, he married his 13-year-old cousin. Now, they accused R. Kelly of marrying Aaliyah, right? And I don't want anyone to take offense to this. We have to have the intelligent conversation and discussions, right? And I would like to have some respectful comments about this. And if you followed the R. Kelly case, not saying that this man was R. Kelly in any kind of way, so I don't want people to get in their feelings or emotions and get upset with me. All I'm saying is when I can read this story, and I decided to read the story all the way through instead of stopping and pinpointing things, because if again he married his 13-year-old cousin, and she was actually possibly 12 at the time, and at the time, and they're saying he married Aaliyah, and there was no really, as far as what they, charged R. Kelly with. But at this time, they never charged this man for marrying a 13-year-old. They never charged him for that, and they never charged him for being a bigamist when he was still married to his wife and marrying a 13-year-old, which is really, that is totally, outrageous that he did that, and he was never charged with that. And I also wanted to add in another article is that the 13-year-old said that she was the adult and he was the child in the marriage. And that's something, interesting about a 13-year-old saying she's an adult and he's the child, but yet still she was 13, possibly 12, and he was of age, a full-grown fledged adult. And they did cancel his tour. Now think about the Me Too movement canceling R. Kelly's tours and interfering in his venues so he could not make money. But yet and still, he was able, he was blacklisted, just like R. Kelly. Blacklisted. His music was blacklisted from radios, R. Kelly's music. And Jerry Lewis' music, he's saying the article is saying he was blacklisted from the radio. R. Kelly earnings dropped. His money dropped. Yes, it did. He wasn't able to pay his child support when they started canceling his venues. Well, and it's saying that Mr. Lewis' earnings dropped overnight to virtually nothing. So those are just some things that I was able to point out, in this article. And so again, please don't come, to, be upset and attack me. I was just merely pointing out some things that I recognize in this story being told by Mr. Lewis. But Mr. Lewis did, to me, in my opinion, live a reckless life. He had many wives, so many wives that he had, that he married, and he swore a lot, and things like that. It talks about in his, in his performances and things like that. He broke some rules that he wasn't supposed to break. And like he's saying, he could have rearranged his life a little bit different, but he didn't hide anything from the people. He said he just went on with his life as usual. So he didn't even try to do what's right, you know what I mean, and try to get an annulment from this 13-year-old, allegedly could have been 12. or a divorce from her. He didn't do any of that. He just lived his life as usual. But he really, if he was already married to someone, then his marriage to the 13-year-old, allegedly 12-year-old, would not have been legal anyway, because he was still married. And until he gets a divorce from the previous wife, then his marriage to the 13-year-old, allegedly 12, possibly 12-year-old, would not be legal until that took place. If people don't know a lot about when someone marries somebody else and they're still married, that the wife they marry, the second wife, would, let's just say it's two women. He's already married. He married someone else. The someone else, as in that wife, that marriage would not be valid until he actually divorces the first wife that he still currently would be married to. And so he struggled with alcohol and drug abuse, legal disputes, and physical illness. So he had a lot of legal disputes out there. He had some early deaths. His wife, a lot of the marriages ended. Two of his many marriages ended in early death. I mean, so he did live his life very recklessly. And again, I want to point out that what I mentioned with the R. Kelly thing, those were things just up there where the tours was canceled, where he was accused of marrying Aaliyah. And then the fact is that his music was blacklisted, from the radio, where they muted him, and then his earnings dropped. So that's all I was pointing out with the R. Kelly thing. But the rest of this stuff, I'm talking about Jerry Lewis himself, and and how he lived his life, how he married somebody and was already married, so he was a bigamist. And then two of his many wives, they had an early death. He had physical physical illness. He had a drug and alcohol abuse struggle with that, legal disputes, and he also owed the IRS money. Jerry Lewis, he owed the IRS money, because his finances was a wreck. That's another thing that might be pointed out when it came down to people mismanaging R. Kelly's money. I would say that about the finances. They were, people was all involved in that, with Mr. Kelly's money. And they're talking about how his finances was a wreck. But this man right here, Jerry Lewis, he later, his wives said that he was physical and mental, abusive towards them, and mental cruelty that nearly drove one of the wives to suicide. And she said she'd probably be dead by now. That was in 1989. One of his wives, she said, if she had still been married to him. And then he came back and reinvented himself as a country performer in the 60s. And the music industry forgave him. And that's the thing about when you compare sometimes different races of people, they're not willing to forgive R. Kelly, but they were willing to forgive Jerry Lewis. And even though this was a long time ago when he was in the industry, it still goes to show you the difference between how blacks are treated in the industry and how whites are treated in the industry. And I'm just pointing that out because it says right here, the music industry eventually forgave him long after he stopped having hits. And I think that we have to learn to forgive, and we have to learn to separate the facts from the gossip and the unknown, gossip and the lies and the untruths when we're dealing with situations that could definitely harm and destroy somebody's livelihood. And I saw a lot of people unable to separate the facts from the gossip and the untruths when it came to the R. Kelly case. And it's really a sad thing. And I continue to pray that he will get his appeal, and he will win his appeal, and that he will be, his sentencing will be vacated or overturned. I do pray that for Mr. Kelly. But as I look at this article, with, Jerry Lewis, and I'm reading the stuff that there was some similarities. There were actually some similarities, so we can have the smart, intelligent conversation. There were some similarities with Jerry Lewis and with some of the things that happened to him, as far as, being blacklisted, being canceled, his venues, his tours, and his earnings dropping, and the fact that he actually did marry a 13-year-old, and he never did get a divorce. And that's the thing, that's factual, whereas R. Kelly's people wanted to make it factual. with that whole situation. But with Jerry Lewis, he admitted those things, and he said that he wanted to tell the truth basically to the people. I mean, he said he didn't hide anything from the people. I'll say that because that's what the article is saying he said. And he went on with his life as usual. Also, he even won the Grammys, and he went on to record music with some of the industry's greatest stars, which I named in here. Also, he even was able to convince disc jockeys to give him a second chance, and they did. I mean, he said, "Look, man, let's get together and draw a line on this stuff. You know, a peace treaty. You know." And I think there should be a peace treaty when it comes to R. Kelly. They need to release this man, and also there should be a peace treaty. You know, at some point we have to move forward and um, forgive instead of carrying around false responsibility and false anger on things that the man R. Kelly really didn't do versus Jerry Lewis did. But the people went on and forgave Jerry Lewis, gave him a second chance, you know, and he went on to do what he did, live his life as usual, you know, and, you know, he even went back and violated a performance that he wasn't supposed to for the Grand Ole Opry, and he broke two long-standing rules: no swearing and no non-country songs, which he did, you know. And he told him that he was a rockin' and rollin' country and western rhythm and blues singing mother, you know what, and he told the audience. And so there was a lot of stuff that was reckless in Jerry Lewis' life, and so I'm not here to celebrate his life like that, because I'm not. I mean, I'm not here to do that, and I'm not here to condemn him. I'm not here to put him down. But what I am going to say is he did live an outrageous, reckless life. He made a lot of choices that probably most of us, and there are some people making choices, but most of us will not make those choices. But there were some similarities, as I pointed out, with him and the RSK as far as how they did Mr. Robert Sylvester Kelly. But this man, Jerry Lewis, he really did live a reckless life. He was married 7 times and was rarely far from trouble or death, and marrying a 13-year-old, and did not deny that he did it, and went on with his life as usual without even divorcing the first wife. And he even had where one of the wives drowned in a swimming pool while suing for divorce. Did they even look into that? See, this is when we talk about, you know, the races and what blacks go through every day. And what Terrell Owens said is this is the life that blacks live daily. Whereas, you know, you look at other races, that's not necessarily happening to them. So did they even, you know, investigate that drowning where she was suing for divorce and she drowned? So how did she drown? And then the 5th wife died of an apparent drug overdose. So there was some drugs, like he said, he struggled with drug and alcohol abuse. And so there was obviously drugs and alcohol involved in a lot of his relationships with his wives. And then after that, within a year, he married Carrie McCarver, who was 21. Now, and Sean Stevens, his 5th wife, was 23 years his junior. So when people want to talk about men in general marrying younger women or dating them that are of age or age of consent, of age, and they're wanting to put people down and put black men behind bars, but how come nothing never happened as far as the outrage of these women that he was marrying that were very young? Because 21 and this man was way of age, and then someone was 23 years his junior, and he was marrying these young women, so he had a thing for young women. And but I don't see anywhere in this article that he served any jail time, that he was prosecuted, or a RICO charge filed on him for the lifestyle that he was leading with all these different women. and he was marrying them. Maybe that's what saved him. I don't know, that he was marrying these women, because I believe Chuck Berry was accused, you know, and so uh, crossing state lines with a young woman. And I'm just looking at the difference in how black men are treated and how white men are treated. And so when I read this article, like I said, I brought up some similarities, because there are some similarities. We cannot say it isn't based on this article. But at the same time, how come he was not, scrutinized, you know, like other black men are, scrutinized? He was definitely, to me, not scrutinized like that. Earlier he was, but um, it's really sad to know that blacks will probably never, especially black men, will probably never, be treated with equality. And I say that to say this because just there's some, like I said, some similar comparisons here, similarities. And we have a black man sitting behind bars, and they keep compiling on things and compiling and want to charge and take him through all these different, court trials. Whereas this man, I don't see anywhere where he was, charged with anything or in an investigation or anything like that. But in the one where the 21-year-old Carrie McCarver, she filed for divorce in '86, accusing him of physical abuse and infidelity. He countersued, and both petitions eventually were dropped, and they found a divorce in 2005 after several years of separation. Okay, and another son by our previous marriage. Think about this. Steve Allen Lewis, 3. He was 3 years of age, a little boy. He drowned in a swimming pool in 1962. Was there any investigation of that? Um, his finances were chaotic, but he made millions. And he also liked his money in cash. And I think that came out in the trial, this second trial, just recently, in the Chicago trial of R. Kelly. I've heard that before, and I think that came out that he liked to be paid in cash. And this is what they're saying about Lewis, Jerry Lewis, that he made millions, but he liked his money in cash. And he ended up owing hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Internal Revenue Service. And with R. Kelly, he was supposed to have a business manager taking care of all of that. And how did he wind up on the IRS? I will never, I don't know. But because if you have a business manager, your business manager should be taking care of all of those things, or assigning someone to do that on the singer's behalf. And so this man wind up owing hundreds of thousands of dollars to the IRS, Mr. Lewis. And I wonder if he ever paid all of that money back. Okay. And he was welcoming tourists to his 1994 residence, longtime residence. And then he had set up a phone number, to make money off of that. And then it's just a lot went on with this man. I mean, it's just not about, he had some hit songs out there. He did a whole lot of shaking going on, and there was a lot of different songs that he put out. What made Milwaukee famous has made a loser out of me. She still comes around. She even woke me up to say goodbye. But we know that the whole lot of shaking going on was a really big song for him. And also Great Balls of Fire, Those were, you know, big songs and things like that. But this man's life was truly chaotic, and he went on and passed on. And to just read about this man's life is, to me, I never knew about his whole life. I just knew he had put out some songs back in the day, you know, but to read about this man's life and the chaotic life that he had and all the wives that he married, including a 13-year-old, possibly 12-year-old, I pray that he repented of his sins and asked for forgiveness, because a lot of the stuff that he did, a lot of us probably will never do in our life. There's things we will do because we're not perfect. We will make mistakes, and some things are intentional, some are unintentional. But he said that he was still going to be playing the devil's music after years, when a Bible school classmate encountered him, you know, meeting him years later. He said he was still playing the devil's music. When asked, he said, "Yes, I am." But one of the things that he said, and it's interesting, but he said this. He said, "The music that they kicked me out of school for is the same kind of music they play in their churches today. The difference is I know I am playing for the devil and they don't." He said he knew. He knew he was playing for the devil. That, I mean, and you gotta say something on that. He knew it. And he said the difference is they don't know it, but I knew it. You see what I'm saying? See, God knows what you know. And so at least he was real. Like he said, he wanted to, he didn't hide nothing from the people. He didn't hide anything from the people. He knew that he was playing the devil's music. And see, God does know what you know and what you don't know. But I still hope, well, I'll say I hope that he asked for forgiveness, you know, of the sins he committed, the wrongs that he did, the life that he lived, and that he repented, you know, because that's the thing right there. But he knew, and that's what he said. So with that being said, you guys, I'm out, and I'll be back with you soon. Thank you all again for tuning in. Thank you for giving the video a thumbs up that will watch the video. Thank you for sharing the video. And also, thank all my new subscribers. Once again, thank you for supporting the channel. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. And I'll be back with you soon. God bless you.